I'm from Purdue University, and my pronouns are she and her, and I'm the associate director there, and my team is responsible for building and deploying the clusters there at the university. Next, I'm going to pass it to Jim, and each of the CaRCC system-facing team is going to introduce themselves so you can put a name and face with us. Jim?
I'm Jim Leas, and I'm from Penn State University, and I'm with the Office of the Associate CIO for Research, and we sort of dual report to the CIO and the Senior Vice President for Research, the Senior Research Officer at Penn State. And we do just what you say. We try to make sure research is first and foremost in the thinking of the other IT organizations on the campus. And I've been doing this role for about 2 or 3 years. And I'll pass it off to Brian, who's been our longtime coordinator for this call.
So I'm Brian Haymore. I'm with the University of Utah, the Center for High Performance Computing there. Been here for, I don't know, over 20 years and involved with the system side of things on our HPC resources. So I think, John, you're next.
Hi, I'm John Bloss. I'm a HPC Systems Engineer at the National Center for Atmospheric Research. I'm also the workshop chair for the HPC SYSPROS workshop at SC21 this year, which has been recently announced as a hybrid format workshop. So even if you're unable to travel to SC this year, you will still have the ability to participate in the workshop. Our submissions are closing within the next month, so I urge you all to submit any paper, presentation, lightning talk, or artifact that you think would be great to show the rest of the community. So once again, the submissions are closing on September 17th. I hope to see some great papers and talks from all of you. Next, I'll hand it off to Jason Wells.
Hi, my name is Jason Wells. I'm a senior research computing consultant at Bentley University, which is a small business school near Boston, Mass. I'm literally the only person at Bentley that understands anything that all of you all do. So I represent everything from systems facing to researcher facing, data facing, etc. I am also on the technical steering committee for Open HPC and on the CaRCC Decadal Survey, which is something I hope you all will hear more about very, very soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. I don't see Sai. Is there anyone else from the team that I'm missing? Very good.
Just Sai.
Okay, very good. Thanks, everyone. So today we're going to have this an open forum discussion, and we'll try to keep the conversation moving. Our goal today is to really talk from a two-pronged approach. We want to talk about PEARC, and was that did you learn anything there that would, you would want to discuss from a system-facing perspective? But more importantly, we'd also like to talk about this working group and how we can make this better throughout the upcoming months and different topics, and how we can address your needs as a system-facing professional. So to get us started, I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about if you've attended PEARC. If you don't mind unmuting or talking directly or chatting, I'd like to know if you thought the program itself was useful. And in particular, I'm looking at, did you think that the flipped conference mechanism, so the fact that all the presentations were done up front, and then we had discussion, people coming in and discussing. I'm interested to hearing if one that was useful, or did you find that very frustrating and not useful at all? No comment?
Go ahead. I like the format, except for the rapid hops. It would have been nicer to have a room where you stayed on the connection and rolled through. The lightning talks was nice, but I found it very difficult to go from one to the other because it'd be like, okay, this one closed, now this one opens. It was very difficult to do transitioning. So if we do it again, I would try to recommend maybe a single room for a connection and manage it within the block.
thank you for your feedback, because I'm also on the SC committee, and I'm doing the virtual logistics. So this is really good information for us. I know there was a second person. Is there someone else that would like to chime in?
Yeah, that was me. And I was going to say, first of all, the same thing he did, that was really frustrating, you know, by the time, especially if you're on a mobile device. I don't know if anybody of you tried to do it on a mobile device, but every time it pop up with, hey, you got points for this, and you try to close that, and then it take you to the scoreboard instead of, and then by the time you got back, they're halfway through their talk. But also, even knowing that it was that way, I mean, by the time I got past the first day, I knew that I could watch those ahead of time, but I didn't have any heads up on that. So I'm going, oh, this sounds like an interesting talk. I jump in the room, and it's like, I'm supposed to have already known all about it. So that part was frustrating. Now, the content
I'm ashamed to admit that I was also got to the talks and didn't realize I was already supposed to have watched them.
Kyle, were you done talking?
Yeah.
Okay, so Kyle and Zach, what I hear you saying, and I see Bob also posted, need to read directions for the conference in advance. So same here, like Bob, I totally understand, but full transparency, I was one of the co-chairs. So this is why you should be very diligent and truthful during this conversation, because as a future PEARC members, we really want the system-facing team to be represented there, and we want the conference to be useful. So one of the things that I'm hearing is that the communication was absolutely terrible. We can all agree?
Terrible might be a strong word, but it was, yeah, it was definitely not obvious to me before the start of the second day that we were meant to be watching the time.
Yeah, and I appreciated the ability to watch them ahead of time, because then it could also be where I could actually preload them and then go to the questions and answers sessions. And I felt that was actually a very powerful option. So I think it may be in the initial plenary or, you know, on the bootstrap, get people to watch the things, because I think that was also another piece of trying to cram your presentation in versus the actual discussion. And I think that in a virtual space was very nice to see, okay, you know, go and watch these at your leisure. We're going to do a brief burst to, you know, update or, you know, get people oriented. But then I found the conversations were good. And I wish we had a little more time for each of those buckets. The, you know, people trying to go over the presentation and do Q&A. I think we need to commit to one or the other of how that goes.
Okay, Zach?
If I could just really quickly, sorry, I know I've been talking a lot, but I found myself doing another thing that I'm also not proud to admit, and that's trying to watch another talk while I was listening to the Q&A. So that's probably not how it was, you know, intended to be done.
So that is really great feedback. One question I would like to know is, do you think there was enough content for system-facing professionals? That one of my biggest concerns is, do we have enough here for folks like you that it's interesting? And think this front loads our conversation for where John wants to take the SYSPROS at SC and future PEARCs. And I think it's really important. Do we understand that we have the right content? Is there enough there that it seems interesting? And are you getting the kind of support you need in your day-to-day jobs that helps jumpstart? Because realizing in a system-facing type of job, it's not like we can send you as a supervisor to training, but training really doesn't exist. These conferences are really there to help facilitate some of those conversations. So I would like to hear some comments specifically about, is there enough system-facing content for all of you?
I found some of the good system-facing content, and I think that format actually worked out well also. To do the, am I really, you know, do the presentation, then I'm really interested to ask the questions. So I think it was Purdue presenting on one of the things where it's like, oh, okay, this is the configuration, this is what we're doing. And so I think it's, you know, getting people to watch those. I think it may have been also, you know, chicken and egg problem, where especially in systems facing ones, I think it's getting the details, getting the blinking light diagrams out, and then doing the Q&A. This might also lend itself to some of the distribution kind of methodologies of, here's our configurations. This is the way we, wired one way or the other. So that might be a good thing. And this might lead to invitations that could be, because then you can present it a different way.
Thank you for your feedback. Additional people we haven't heard from.
So thanks, Betsy. It's Al. I'm still at Texas Tech. I've held back since I was out for surgery during PEARC, so I didn't actually attend. But in previous years, we had run both at supercomputing and at, so I'm generalizing beyond just PEARC here, and at other specific conferences, workshops on system-facing related topic, which is data center control. Specifically, we have a set of workshops under the acronym DAC, Data Center Automation, Analytics, and Control. So DAAC-workshop.org. We have had good attendance at this, but didn't manage to get it accepted at this supercomputing. So in my view, I run the high performance computing here at Texas Tech. We have 3 machine rooms, and I also co-direct National Science Foundation funded Industry University Cooperative Research Center, where we've been working in close harmony. It's our center is cloud and autonomic computing, so cloud and highly automated computing. So data centers, basically. We've been working with vendors and increasingly with the energy industry itself for automating data center control. And I think this is a topic that gets short shrift in a lot of HPC settings, because you assume, I'm a particle physicist, and we used to draw pictures of our detectors, and they always floated in the air. They never had legs, right? And the engineers would complain about that. So it's the same thing with HPC systems. We imagine the systems in isolation, but really, when you look at how you actually operate them, they have to be deeply coupled with the data centers that support them, with power, cooling, these days liquid cooling, networking. And so these are data center automation topics. So I would like to see, even though somehow this year, in spite of the great success of this workshop series, we didn't get it accepted. I would like to see more of the data center automation topics. I to come at this from the practical point of view of my data centers. It's extraordinarily crude, the level of control that I have over this sort of industrial controls that I depend on in my data centers. So I'll stop there, but just to say that I think this is a systems facing topic, and I think we need to have a bigger view than just a cluster.
Thank you, Alan. And in the chat I put, if you're interested, if this group is interested in having more of those talks, please respond in the chat. That way we get some sense of if the topic is useful, because we want to make sure we're listening to everyone. Jim, would you like to throw out one of our PEARC specific topics that you wanted to discuss during this talk?
Yeah, so one of the other things we wanted to talk about was sort of your PEARC notebook. What interested you? What stood out to you? What were some of the general themes? I think Kirk mentioned it. I believe we talked about the Anvil talk, which I thought was really good. The new Purdue system, but I guess what the overall theme on that was that I was very impressed at how our institutions are involved with, being part of the national cyber infrastructure. They're not just waiting for national labs to set up a new resource. They're actually, proposing to the funding agencies and becoming part of the national cyber infrastructure, making their systems part of Exceed, or, like in the case of Jetstream, making that a resource that's available to K through 12, certainly. So that was one of the themes that really stuck out to me, was how involved, you know, the people that make up part of this group were in you know, taking the national cyber infrastructure strategy forward. And then the other theme that came out in sort of systems facing talk after systems facing talk was that these supply chain problems are real, and we are having problems getting these processors, particularly the GPUs, to make this go. And some of our plans, I know, including some of the new cluster that we're doing at Penn State, our plans have been put off, you know, close to a year now, just because of our inability to get all of the component parts that make up our new cluster, which is really, you know, geared toward artificial intelligence research. And so it needs a lot of GPU capability in addition to the traditional CPU capability. So those were two of the themes that stuck out to me that I shared with my group and the people that are making our cluster. And I was wondering if, you know, if a particular talk interested you, if a general theme stood out, and then also if a particular talk stood out to you, do we need to follow up as part of this group? Maybe we make a session out of it, you know, out of that 10-minute talk. Maybe people are more interested in doing, you know, in doing more things. So do we need to have a session on it? And what did you see at PEARC that would make a good CaRC systems facing session? So I'll open that up to the group and see what people think. I told you, Betsy, we might have one of these anyone moments.
Well, I'm sitting here going,
I'll pop in as an anyone.
So long
here,
ago. What happened?
Oh, okay.
Oh, I was going to say PEARC was so long ago, it's kind of fallen off the side of my head. So I was trying to recall what was there. And that.
One of the sessions that I attended, I thought was very valuable, was the trifecta of cold whatever.
Cold front?
Front, yes, thanks. And open on demand and XD mod, and how they're sort of getting integrated and over time becoming more and more valuable. I thought that was particularly useful, and they've set up like exercises on GitHub. That was really very useful.
So Chris, can I ask just a couple of follow-up questions to that? Because I find that interesting. I'm assuming, since you're on the system facing call, which is why I want to clarify, that you're more of a systems engineer, system admin, but that may not be the case. From your perspective, why, what interests you about these applications in general, from your role as in your job?
Okay, so I have two hats. So wearing my systems facing hat right now. Having on demand, and Riku is here also, has done most of the integration and setup of it, is becoming tremendously popular, as so many of our researchers are actually the undergrads, grad students, and postdocs, and not faculty. Having an interface that's a little bit closer to a cell phone is so appealing to them, and not having to learn command line Linux. So that part was super good. And then wearing my researcher face, well, actually the stakeholder facing more or less part of Cold Front is the ability to report and collect results. So that requirement to acknowledge papers, funding, keep track of how many PIs are on the system, how many users, and having that integrated is something that we don't do at Arizona. We have a different methodology for some of that, but those aspects are really neat.
Okay, thank you. And Ryan, I think you had some input as well.
Yeah, if we don't do what these software applications do, we have to do it ourselves manually, which is not great. And also we have to install these things if they're going to get on the system. So we have to know how to do that. And you know, if they're not working well for performance reasons or whatever, Insight's and how to fix that, et cetera. So it's mainly transferring work somewhere where it really needs to happen.
Thank you. And then do you feel, as a system professional, that you have the input to some of these organizations to help make those applications better. During those sessions, I think they had open forum discussions, and I think the Open on Demand has a community in and of itself. But I'm curious, do you feel like as system professionals that you can have input into those organizations or those groups to make the applications better?
I can only speak to Open on Demand, but I participate in their community on I figure it's discourse or something like that. And so that's, yeah, I've been able to get good help there. The others I haven't really dealt with.
Okay, and Brian chats that the open account was, Open ACCT was another nice compliment presentation in relationship to CodeFront. Thank you, Brian. Anyone else to follow up with Jim's original question?
Including ideas for, future sessions. If something struck you as very interesting, we'll see if we can either get those speakers or a complementary set of speakers to address this group in one of our calls.
And we can start to pivot more into, since as Rick, I think was the person that said PEARC was so long ago, I can't remember. I'd like to also start to open it up to this group in particular, where we navigate the topics. From month to month, our group wants to make sure that we're delivering content that is useful to you. And some of the ideas that we've seen is the data center discussion, and we can start to narrow in on some of those. GPU proliferation on many campuses are also a big topic. And then the other thing I've been thinking about is, the fact that our vendors are having a hard time delivering solutions to us as system professionals. Do you feel some of that crunch there? And I guess more, let's open it up to, like, what are the pain points of your community, and what are the topics that we can help to facilitate that, even if it's bringing in vendors to have discussions. I think the topic is wide open, and we would really like some feedback here.
Well, I think one of the continuous pain points for us is, and I'm sure any of you who are in an academic environment feel this too, is you have researchers coming to you and saying, I need, a few terabytes of storage. Well, it turns out to be, I need a few terabytes, each of my students needs a few terabytes, and each of my co-PI, and the next thing you know, you're up to half a petabyte, and they don't want to pay the price for the high-speed, closely coupled storage. And in many cases, they have no storage budget, and they're still looking for 500 terabytes for $1. And, it's like, what are the options? Because right now, from what I hear back from the faculty side, is that funding for storage is kind of like non-existent. And, does anybody have creative ideas for that?
Let's see. So Alan, I could give an experience at Texas Tech. Is this a conversation you'd like to do a presentation on? Alan, could you give me a little
I was
more?
responding to a previous inquiry about liquid cooling as a topic. Sorry, it wasn't meant to be in line here.
Thank you. Thank you. So Bob also points out that the GPUs has come up on the research facing. Does this team feel like the GPUs, in terms of delivering that service, feel like that's an important topic that we should explore? Even as simple as having something during SYSPROS, again, because we have John, who's also represents the SYSPRO front of this, and we want to make sure that we're continuing these discussions. Do people feel like that's a good content?
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges we're facing is we have difficulty getting views into the GPU utilization. So like the NVIDIA tools doesn't really give us all the tools. It might be nice to actually have somebody from NVIDIA to maybe talk about, now with the A100s, you can slice them into like 7 different GPU banks, but how do you measure that? How, like with our CPU stuff, we've got all kinds of metrics we can pull out. these GPUs, you know, we could have somebody who's using like a 1/10 of the GPU, and you could fit on a smaller, cheaper one or things like that.
That's great. And Kirk, I think you also put in handling health science and social science data. Is that from a protected CMC?
Yeah, so right now we're facing two things, installing RedCap to handle sort of our health sciences things, which doesn't have the same level of our CUI stuff from our engineers getting DoD contracts. So how can we sort of try to line up all the security boxes so that, you know, we're not duplicating effort, or, you know, at what levels do we, you know, protect to a certain level here and a different level there. Just saw one, I know it was yesterday's Emerging Centers plenary speak there, where it's like, you know, we're cities. We can't say at a universal, you know, institutional level that everybody will be CMMC level 3. It's impossible. So, you know, as systems people, how do we help configure? What are the technical controls that we can control? And then where do we push back and say, it's not an IT problem, it's a HR problem or a researcher problem, because we don't know who's in the lab. We can't, you know, you give us accounts, we'll create accounts, but those kinds of things. So I think that might be a helpful one of like, you know, what are the, you know, STIGs that we should apply, or what are the common practices? Because I think that one, especially from yesterday's conversation of like banding together and starting to sort of push back on some of these things and say, you know, a full up NIST 853 level control isn't very achievable unless you really force it. And then it becomes, you know, where researchers don't like it. Systems people will go, sure, that's what you want, but, you know, that negotiation.
Very good, thank you. So far we've heard data center topics, we've heard health science, we've heard GPUs. Are there other topics that as you're facing, I know one thing we had previously, we had discussed is CentOS 8 and that whole discussion. And I think that, John, we were gonna do further discussion on that. Is that still true, John? And does this group think that that's still a useful topic to continue? John,
Yeah, so there might be just some discussion about it at the workshop. There may not be a dedicated time slot to it, but I'm sure it'll come up in the open discussion, since I'm sure a lot of folks are still on the edge about, you know, where they're gonna, you know, take things with regard to staying on board with CentOS Stream, or hopping ship to Rocky or some other distribution. I know at NCAR we're going to be shifting from CentOS to OpenSUSE.
So just to get kind of a an idea, is this still a topic that we should pursue in this track? Because I think our assumption is we need to continue that discussion, and we're looking for some feedback from all of you to decide if that's a topic we should continue.
Yeah, I think it's pretty settled at this point. I think the issues are largely water under the bridge at this, unless there's unsolved problems that I haven't heard of. You know, we, for example, have just gone forward with Rocky Linux, and I've been quite happy with it. I think there may be some other choices out there, but I'm not hearing a bunch of panic like when it was originally announced.
Thank you. Anyone else?
You know, if people are shy, when Betsy asks a question, you can go down to the reactions button, maybe give a thumbs up if you agree with that. It would be interesting just to see how many people are still that level of concern with it, or for most of you, is it a past decision now? You've already made it. So maybe are people still concerned and should still want to hear about it? And if you could give us a thumbs up on your reactions button.
Because I know for my team, it's a pretty big deal yet, and we're still trying to sort it out. That's why I was curious.
So just to borrow from how we resolved a related topic, could we invite experience for people who have made the decision and have gone ahead? I know that many people may still be deciding it, but it might be helpful to them to hear the experiences of those who have gone ahead.
That's great, Alan.
It's a really good suggestion.
Also, if I might, I think that having the discussion and, if anything, kind of putting out a general findings for that helps places that might be a bit more of emerging centers. So, AM&H being present in a lot of things, but still being, I guess, maybe on the smaller side of, given some of the people that are here. We have a path forward, but it would be very interesting to kind of have the discussion, have somebody sort of bring it out and say 40% of the respondents are, the people involved in this conversation are going to Rocky. Other people are doing SUSE. Other people are doing REL, whatever it may be. And I think it does two things. Number one, it helps us understand where in the community we're going. So if I choose to go with SUSE or I choose to go with REL, and I know that these 5 other institutions are doing it, it allows me to then reach out to my cohort and say, how are you guys solving X problem? And then 2, I think for places that are trying to make the decision or smaller emerging centers who might be scared to even come to this call, in some cases, it then serves as guidance document because our whole HPC, scientific computing, science DMZ, all the associated things that go along with it is a bit of, it's a couple of years old for us at this point. And being able to poll the community and see what everybody else was doing was a huge driver forward in helping us make certain decisions because it's already been well-trod ground. So I think there's always a use in having the conversation, even if it's largely settled and people know where they are.
That's great feedback. Thank you. Pausing to see if anyone has any other additional comments. So one other topic that I think that that we've heard off and on throughout at least I have heard, is storage in general, storage technologies. Is that also of interest to people on the call? Is it just in terms of storage, what are large institutions doing? What are small institutions doing? Like Michael said that there's a range of people that attend these. Is that something? Okay, I see some thumbs up. That's good.
So I would actually definitely say one thing with the storage is not only with the technologies that we're using, but what's the best practices that larger institutions have done this. Again, if you've been dealing with this with researchers for 10 years and I've been dealing with it for 3, what are those best practices? And I'm sorry if I seem to be the evangelist for the smaller guys on here. And Kirk, stop smiling because you say this all the time. If I may be the evangelist for the kind of the smaller centers, as it were, but there is huge amounts of science that are being done in small and mid-sized facilities that aren't coming here, that are still trying to struggle with these questions. So the experience is valuable, even if it's just put out there as a listing of findings and best practices, or here's how you're doing it. And again, a directory of who's hitting what and when gives us people to go to on a more one-on-one or smaller colleague to colleague type basis.
Yeah,
like I do with Kurt all the time.
There are 2 things there, just real quick. The first is if we can show our bosses what everybody else is doing, more likely to get the money to do it. And 2, it would just be really helpful to know before we roll out this thing that's going to let the entire campus start putting data on a system. And we've just been dealing with a relatively small slice that does HPC. what should we get ready for?
Yeah, and I also take a look at some of the data sources we might pull into an HPC may exist other places, and we, the IT systems type people, may not actually realize it, but the scientist is continually pulling something down. I find out they have a data transfer node. I don't have to keep copies of that data all the time because I can just pull it in when I need to. And this is where you get the HPC, the network guys who, in the case of AM&H, are Sujesh Singh, who's on this call as well, and myself. We do these things together. But if we're continually pulling data from Yale University and I need it for processing and then I can dump it and only keep my results, do I need to keep a copy of it there? Or is it just quicker, cheaper for me to go DTN to DTN, pull that in, and now maybe I wait an hour, but I just saved the institution $25,000. So there's, yes, I know it's a bit, guerrilla in my thinking, like how I do these things, but this is when you don't have maybe the resources that a major facility would have. These are the tips and tricks that you only get in these conversations. So thank you for listening.
Well, and things like, how do I, have a disaster recovery plan for a petabyte plus of data that took, millions of core hours to generate. I don't have a replication capability. So some of the things that I'm wrestling with is, what is our statement? Do we say we have backups, or do we say you are responsible for your own backups? Or, what's the system way of solving some of these things? Some of the hierarchical methods, where, yes, you've had your project here now for 3 years and you haven't touched the petabyte of data. Can I get rid of it now, please? Those interesting philosophical questions.
So the collaborative programs that might be mirrors of the same data. So we do something with Utah and Lynchburg University where we're going to be a third mirror for it. Is it necessary to back it up if we're mirroring it in 3 places geographically across the country and across the pond? Does it make sense? Those are questions that we should bring up.
Right. So I think it's maybe useful to differentiate storage, as in the technology of storage, from data policy topics, like in the last 2 comments. Each of those areas can be enormously complex. You probably have seen that there's a trend lately to refer to what we do as research computing and data. That phrase always feels just a little unfinished. Data what, But RCD as a field, as opposed to just HPC, has been suggested. But even sticking with just the technology of storage, that lately is an enormously complex and fast-changing topic. We've spent months exploring a replacement for our NFS file systems, whereas just a few years ago, it would have been a much simpler and much less performant set of choices.
Thank you, Alan. I want to get one other conversation going that we should have started with. We want CARC to be a safe place for people to do presentations, to feel like they're included. Do you feel like the system-facing track is a inclusive place, safe place? And do you feel like the presentations we give, are they coming from the right kind of people? Because as I was hearing everyone talking today, it seems like, Michael, you'd be great to sit on a panel to talk about from a small institution perspective. And are we encouraging those kind of conversations? And if we're not, how can we do that? Because I think that's our mission, is to make sure we're delivering a community that is useful. So I would like to hear some feedback from the community today on that.
I mean, I'm not really even a systems-facing guy, so the fact that I've been here and monopolizing the whole conversation should say something. Also, when your team does something, puts something together, gets some system working, and it's, you didn't invent something new, you might not think this is worth, I don't know, doing a presentation about. But for someone who's working at some, institution that's, 1 level below yours, and their goal is to set up something like that, that would be exactly what they would want to see.
Thank you.
I think this is part of like CARC, all these organizations, all of these things are supposed to be contributing to a body of knowledge. And that body of knowledge, I think there's a lot of things that people overlook. And, you know, we need to keep building on that, because I think there are so many times that I've seen in the last couple of years where the assumption that you know how to do this is in there. And it turns out that it is not as obvious as you think. Maybe you trod that ground 5 years ago, but what about all the other emerging centers and everything like that? And as far as like sitting on any group, you know, if you want to subject the entire community to me on a regular basis, you guys can feel free to do it. I pray for you guys, but I'm happy to help insofar as it contributes to that body of knowledge.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think there's also a introvert component to this. And so this is where we may need to reach out to the directors and invite them to co-present, or because I find that like as a director, I can't go in and talk with researchers at researcher speed until I've done the research stuff and they talk amongst themselves, and by peer, they do this. And I think it's the same in the system-facing folks, that the conversations are different speeds and different methodologies. So part of it may be invitationals, where we actually push towards a, you know, hey, I have a guy who really knows Seth, really hates people, you know, but when it's like, okay, what, you know, what could you tell me about these things, or do a little front end facing things, might be a piece to this too, because a couple of my systems folks really do not like talking with people or presenting, but when in the same table, you know, it's a different story. So I think this may be something we need to look at also. How can we facilitate that? And I don't know how.
Okay, thank you. Any additional thoughts as we're winding down our time?
Betsy, I think I heard somebody trying to jump in right before somebody spoke last time. Is anybody?
Oh yeah, I was talking over someone, which I apologize for, and I'm now begging you to say what you were going to say so I don't feel bad for the rest of the week.
Okay.
I'm also curious, do we find that the Slack channel, the communication mechanisms we use, is that efficient and effective, or are there better ways that we can send out? Like, do you find that you can find useful tools there? Many people have talked about having, you know, large institutions have a lot of access to things that smaller institutions don't. Are there tools and tricks that we should be sharing via Slack or even during these kind of presentations?
I find Slack to be a very effective tool. But I will tell you that there's a lot more chatter goes on the HPC SYSPROS list than on the CARC list. And that's not saying anything bad about CARC. It's just like, that's just another resource. People ask, go to the HPC SYSPROS. There's good conversation going on there pretty much constantly.
To kind of weigh in on that point, I don't think from a CARC standpoint, when we set up the Slack channel, it was intended to, you know, there's multiple adjectives we can use, take the place of compete or anything else for one of these other places. In fact, there's been a number of conversations about other tools that exist out there, but I keep constantly going back to myself saying, where are the conversations happening now? And SYSPROS is where it's at, you know, on the Slack side. And I'm perfectly fine being logged into that server as well. So in my mind, it's disseminating this information out so people know where the conversations are happening, and hopefully they feel welcome enough to, you know, sign up, subscribe, or whatever to, you know, the various channels.
So along those lines, do you mind posting a list of such links in the document here? I think there may be many, including me. I, by the way, deslacked. I just decided I don't have time for it, and I've signed out of almost all Slack channels. So,
oh boy.
And I would second that. I think email lists, especially with specifically to like the CEF list and other things, many people are keyed into that, partially because of the human interaction that happens. Is question goes out, answers go out. So I think maybe another facility or way we can do that will be posting those common lists every so often. Like, you know, here's the Rocky Linux users list or whatever. That might be a good way to facilitate getting the words out and getting people involved in conversations.
So yeah, I'm just going to start an item here in the notes. If people could edit the notes to include the information.
Okay, very good. As we're wrapping up today, the team really appreciates your time and energy you're putting forth. We would really like to keep this an open dialogue. So as you hear of topics and you don't feel comfortable putting it in a public place, the team is always here. You can Slack us directly in the Slack channel. You can send to any one of us our email addresses are available on the website. Because again, we'd want to make sure that this is just a continuation, as Brian has alluded, that we're here to complement things like PEARC and the SYSPROS and the different organizations that are in the SC SYSPROS, all of them. This is a complement to that. And so if you're seeing that a particular topic that you want to have discussed throughout the year, this is the place for us to help facilitate that. Brian, are we at about 2 minutes before we should be ending, or is it at 1:55? I just want to make sure I'm mindful of people's time.
Somewhere between the 50 and the 55 is fine.
Very good.
I mean,
okay.
For anybody who wants to linger around, I think we're welcome to, stay and chat, but being mindful of everybody else who has a schedule.
So any final thoughts from the community before we end our day today?
So I was intrigued by the idea you mentioned of trying to get other inputs and the small system groups. Diversity in the workforce is always a topic. And if there are things that we can do to get this information out more broadly to, minority-facing institutions, for example, or women in HPC and so forth, it could be that the title of the group is a disincentive to some, even though it might be just exactly what they need to learn. So.
Thank you for that. That's a great topic. And I know that CARC as a whole has been trying to address more of workforce development, workforce diversity, inclusion, equity, and access. And so Brian and I can take that forward to the larger group to see if that's a topic that we could facilitate as the CARC organization itself, because I think that is a great topic.
I think the only other thing I would say is, again, and I'm sorry that I'm so introverted, is that with a lot of smaller institutions, I think a lot of the issues that come up with this and trying to get them in, or people that are underrepresented maybe in these larger groups, is that they feel that they're too small. It may be one of these things where we chip away at it piece by piece over, a couple of months or a year, where they start seeing more people like them coming in, and then they're more willing to engage. When I started doing some of the stuff within the NYSERNet community, and I'm in a meeting with Cornell, NYU, Columbia, and Syracuse University, and I fit into their residence halls. In terms of like the sizing, if it was somebody besides me who does not have a problem with just opening my mouth in a large group of people, they would step aside from it. But as we see other people going in saying, okay, we're smaller, you speak a little bit more our language, it's more comfortable because we can find the people at the party that we identify with more, then you can bring them along and get those ideas in there. So sometimes it may be just inviting them into lurk and letting them know they're there. Another thing, frankly, and I don't even, this may be way too logistically hard, is when people start coming in and they're kind of like the newbies, if you ever can find somebody who's almost willing to be their mentor, you know, like I think about, like I was talking to my son today who's on the football team at his high school, and they have like the seniors hanging out with the sophomores. They have the juniors hanging out with the freshmen as kind of like, let me show you how this place works, kid. It's kind of a thing like that. So if you have a kind of an ambassadors that can open those doors and be like, go ahead, ask me the question that you didn't want to ask in public. And I don't know if that helps.
I am so glad you brought that up, because one of the things Brian and I have been talking a lot about is making sure that people that are new to the organization, new to this group, feel welcomed and have that kind of mentorship. So thank you for bringing that up. And I know Tom posted something. Tom, do you want to do a quick shout out on that RCD professional census?
Yeah, there's two things that got posted just recently by Patrick on the capabilities model. We're doing the version 1.1 through the end of September. We encourage universities to fill this out. This kind of helps evaluate where you are in terms of your capabilities compared to other institutions, and you get to see the aggregated data if you submit your capabilities model. And then also we have a group that's doing a census of kind of the research computing and data, or CI professional workforce. We want to kind of understand what the jobs are, what people are doing across all the different facings, from systems to facilitator. And we don't want just the directors to fill it out. We want the boots on the ground to fill it out. And we want to kind of see, ideally, we can get salary comparisons and what you're doing at your institution. So far, we've had over 300 people, but we'd like to be like 10,000 people. And so we're trying any venue we can get to personally reach out to get people to apply the survey. I know it's August. I'm glad you guys are all here. You know, it's start of school and end of summer vacations. So it's impressive you're all participating today. But we really want to get kind of an idea of where the community is, because, you know, we're unheard important factor in supporting research and researchers that our administration doesn't quite understand the importance we play in bringing in grants and supporting researchers. You know, enterprise IT can get a new ERP system, or can move to the cloud and do all these things quite easily with large budgets, where we're constantly strained. So we want to be able to advocate for our community and the profession that we all love and support. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Patrick, did you want to add anything to what Tom said?
Tom covered it pretty well. I put a couple of links into the chat, as Ellen did as well. We have until the end of September for folks who want to complete the capabilities model assessment. It's not a huge lift to do a basic set of data. You can get into a big project with your team if you want to, which you needn't. And then, if you can do that survey that Scott and others in the professionalization group are working on, that'd be great. It only takes about 10 or 15 minutes, and it's going to produce a lot of good data, as Tom said.
And I'll add, Michael, how would you envision formalizing this mentoring capability?
I just come up with the ideas, not the operational things. I hire other people to give me ideas.
Yeah, but I come up with the operational, so I need guidance on how to do the operational.
No. And to be honest with you, being fairly new to this group, you know, I think that's kind of more of like an offline type, you know, maybe brainstorming session about these things. I mean, the first issue, and just having done a couple of these things before, is can you get a group of mentors willing to do it? If there are people that are not willing to be those ambassadors, then the project is doomed to fail. If they don't have the time to do it, nothing worse than being assigned to a person that doesn't have time for you. So I think that there are some of those items. So I think first, getting a cadre of people that would be willing to do this, and then identifying kind of like who they would be done. So first you got to get the people, then second, you got to get the match. So you wouldn't necessarily put me with like a huge R1 university, but maybe if there's a smaller independent research facility that's coming online, or a smaller lab that might be coming online that's doing it, or even community or local colleges, it's a different conversation. I literally am just submitting the report for my science DMZ grant from, a couple of years back now. I probably have more how we got there knowledge than say somebody that did it 10 years ago.
So Mike, I think these are great ideas. Actually, part of the new RCD Nexus program, which is funded by the new Center of Excellence pilot grant, is going to be looking at both staff and student professional development programs. And I think a mentoring discussion would be a really good one. There's a couple of programs that exist that are demonstrated that are working. NC WIT and Women in HPC run mentoring programs. I think you probably participate in the Emerging Centers track, which is an informal peer group that is part of the People Network. So I think there's a start there. There's a couple of other organizations that actually have very structured mentoring programs that we could lean on to do more in this area. But I think that there is some demonstration of people who are have the capacity and do this. I know a lot of people do sort of peer mentoring. They find people who are in a similar situation and they just talk on a regular basis back and forth. So there's a lot, I think there's some informal things going on, but I think the idea of putting together a more formal program is a really good one. And I think, Tom, when we look at the student and staff development areas and themes within the RCD Nexus, there's certainly something we could incorporate into some of the workshops we're planning there. So
yeah, I would recommend looking at the ACM SIGUX mentoring program, which is university computing support in general. That program's been going on for a number of years. We could probably leverage it, some of the experience out of that. And I do believe EDUCAUSE has a CIO mentoring thing that we could leverage as for examples.
Yeah, people who've been through the MORE program for ITLP generally set up mentoring and peer coaching partnerships as well.
Well, a related topic is getting people into the mindset that enables them to put the value equation in front of their university administration. So in CASC, for example, we've had a number of topics related to return on investment and for academic uses of data centers. And then we expanded that to clouds because it turns out it's the same topic. You have to somehow get across to management that university and operational and academic administrative folks that computing is and especially data is increasingly overwhelmingly part of every field of study. It isn't that every person in every field uses supercomputers, but pretty much every field of study has a data-facing side and quite often has a need for computational resources. So that kind of mentoring is also valuable to help people come to grips with the fact that they're not just some little service shop in a corner of a university. You're key and central to the whole academic enterprise. So, as I say, CASC's been doing some stuff. We held some workshops that were well attended. I think there's a role for CARC to pick up on this topic and fold ROI related mentoring. How do you develop accurate cost models for however you're supporting your resource? How do you make the point with administration that that the more available you can make such things, the more productive researchers can be? How do you find a cost recoupment structure that works for your institution? I'll try to find a link that I can put in, but the summary that we had of this was that it really does depend on your institution. You have to sit down, just as with the assessments that somebody referred to, and assess what the values of your institution are and find a way of reflecting them in what you do.
I think that's key, Alan. Yeah, I think, you know, we had a strategic planning workshop at PEARC this year, and people were talking about resources needed, and that idea of value propositions to leadership was a key one. But as you say, it's got to be situated in the context of what are people going to respond to there. For some people, it's ROI. For other people, it's just a compelling story around faculty recruitment and retention. So
we're at the end. Yes, this is a great topic. Thank you. Thank you everyone today for participating. We really appreciate your efforts for coming and staying and participating in the conversation to make our track a better track. Please keep the discussion going. If you have ideas, again, feel free to reach out. If you don't, drop them in the call document. Even, we're here to help. And with that, we're going to wrap up the meeting and call this one done. Thanks again, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. See ya.